What is your positive distraction when you're away from the track? You go out on the ocean?
Sim racing?
Sim racing. So more driving?
Yeah.
Max Verstappen is the current F1 world champion and one of the top 3 simulator drivers in the world. In a world where being a pro sim driver is a full-time job, how does he do that and win the F1 World Drivers' Championship? Let's break it down. This is Max driving at Bathurst, one of the most technically difficult circuits on the planet. Max's qualifying lap at the iRacing Bath first 12 hours last year was in the top tier, racing the best sim drivers and teams in the world. And he set a time 4.5 tenths faster than anyone else. In real racing, conditions can change and the track could be faster, or a driver could get a tow and gain half a second. But in the simulator, it's just each driver and the lap, and there are a lot fewer variables. Then there's this year's Le Mans Virtual, where he starts 4th and launches to be first before the first chicane, then runs away with it until the game crashes. But that's another tale. He raced pro esports racers like James Baldwin, ex-F1 drivers like Roman Grosjean, F2 champion Felipe Drogovic, and other Le Mans 24-hour winners, and Max calmly drove away from them all. Max plays the sim, mostly iRacing and other platforms.
I was spending a lot of time in the simulator. I even competed, of course, in a championship. All the things together, you do pit stops, you do like endurance kind of races, so overtaking, getting overtaken, dealing with traffic, fuel calculations, you have to save fuel, all these kind of things, what you also do in real life.
iRacing is my preferred sim because the cars feel real and the way the tires behave and the car moves feels good. And many pro drivers agree with this. You might be thinking, why is this surprising? He's fast in the real world, of course, so he should be fast in the sim. But the sim and the real world are very similar but not the same. Especially in the final few temperatures of lap time, I've personally witnessed lots of very capable real-world drivers have trouble in the sim. These are drivers who are straight on the pace in real life, but they spin off and hit every barrier in the sim, and it took me a while to adjust. When you jump in the sim, you're giving away senses that you've used for years. You will feel for G-force here of the drivers around you, and you have a 3D sense of speed. Without wheel spin vibration, you have to modify the in-game music, which isn't as good. No G-force in a 2D screen unless you use VR, which has its own quirks that you have to get used to. There are some differences in technique and racing compared to the real world, such as your ability to fill the car and feel a tire slide to determine its corner-to-corner grip. Tire deterioration and gasoline burn-off affect balance. The sim's steering wheel has force feedback, and it's X, but it's hard to replicate what you feel with your backside in the seat of a real racing car. Max, like many top sim drivers, has a few tricks to help listen to this grinding, rubbing noise, which is a tire sound in iRacing. Max turns the engine down and the tires up to know when the tires are close to their limit, instead of feeling it like in a real race car. Many top sim drivers learned on the sim and raced at a high level. In the real world, they've learned to drive quickly in the simulator using fewer senses. So you can often put them in a real car and they can learn to be quick. However, real drivers need to drive a lot more to overcome that little bit of fear or trust in the car. I think if you give a sim driver a lot of track time, they can get very competitive. But Max is coming the opposite way. And there are so many other drivers. Lando Norris, Fernando Alonso, Bruno Spengler, Roman Grosjean. The list goes on. Even the producer Callum here at Driver 61 has battled Valentino Rossi and Fernando Alonso on iRacing. He lost, of course, but nevertheless, Max won the US GP this year at the Circuit of the Americas and was spotted in iRacing lobbies 3 hours later. In the iRacing Petty Lemon, Max fired dive bombs and ran people wide, just like in real life. His strategy for racing here is the same as in the real world, and this move is to start at Le Mans Virtual, where a driver on the inside enters the chicane, which becomes the chicane. For the second portion, Max gets his nose slightly ahead and runs wide to the outside, forcing other drivers to back out, similar to his real-world driving. In this example, Max didn't get a punishment since great competitors put the rules to the limit. another comparison is driving. Max uses every inch of the track and never stops. The Le Mans virtual race last year saw him crash out after taking a lot of curb at the 4 chicanes. A game glitch caused the car to bounce up and hit the barrier. SPA6R followed. Max was in an LMP2 car overtaking a GTE at Rouge. A risky maneuver. He made the GT follow a little unorthodox line, which caused the two to collide and left Max in the barrier. He races to win. Max's partner at Sir Kirkov on Team Redline mentioned that
what makes Max very strong is that he's very dynamic in his driving. So he can drive an impossible car and still send it over the limit. You don't have to tell him to work hard because it's his nature. Like he will push as hard as he can to make sure that he gets the maximum out of the car.
this is one of the reasons why the best drivers have the ability to drive anything to its limit, as well as the ability to adapt to the car and do so very quickly in the real world. You only receive a short amount of time for testing or practice, which means that regardless of how difficult the vehicle is to operate, you will need to modify your driving technique in order to get the most out of it. This fact brings up another fascinating point about the simulation, which is that Max isn't driving a Red Bull F1 car. He is driving GT cars, LMP2 cars, and F3 cars, and they all require different driving styles. The GTS, in particular, requires a different driving style because it is heavier, has fewer drawbacks, and has things like traction control and ABS. Of course, you have to drive this kind of car very differently from a Formula 1 car. For instance, while entering the braking zone in a Formula 1 car or another vehicle with a significant amount of downforce, the driver must apply extremely severe and prompt braking. Reduce your pressure on the brake pedal as the car's downforce disappears. This is important because as the downforce disappears, you will have less grip, and if you keep your foot firmly on the brake pedal, the tires will lock up. In contrast, when driving a GT car equipped with ABS, you often brake at a constant pressure of 80 to 90% for the majority of the straightaway before gradually reducing it as you drive into the turn. This allows you to get the most out of the ABS braking system. It is extremely different in every way.
I'm not racing a Formula 1 car on the simulator, but it's like GT cars, so it's also a different technique of driving. So I just keep testing myself, and especially, these sim drivers, they're so quick. It's very interesting to see them drive because they have no real experience of a car. But somehow, when you look at how they're braking, how they're going throttle, it is how it should be.
The only thing I was looking for from this was how Max's driving style compares from the sim to real life. Well, I've sat and examined a lot of footage of Max racing in both circumstances. And there are some differences, but mainly similarities. It's very fascinating to see them drive because they have no real experience of a car. But somehow, when you look at how they're braking and how they're going through it, it's how it should be. So, what are your thoughts about that? Do you really think Max Verstappen is a sim racing champion? Let us know in the comments. Until next time!